But I just love the group. I love the crowd. You know, Type A, you're here at 6 in the morning, 6:30 to learn about the Broward County economy and the greater economy, and I just love that. You guys are my kind of people. David, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I appreciate that. I am indeed a recovering politician, and I'm proud of that, and I want to also thank the folks that are still in politics. Thank you so much for the leadership you provide to our county. So let's get started. And by the way, if you haven't heard the lead speaker today, David Coe, you're in for a big treat. He is fantastic, and there's a lot to unpack out there in the world, as you can imagine. First of all, before I get started, I want to just pay tribute to a longtime member that we lost in the Executives Association this year. Many of you know him in the community, Paul Daly. Paul Daly was thank you. Paul Daly was a member for over 40 years. He was the youngest president ever in this organization at 39 years old, and he really epitomizes what we all aspire to. He was a tremendous business leader with a great business, employed many, many people over the years. He was tremendously active in the community, involved in many ways, United Way and other good causes like that. He was an absolutely tremendous father and husband and a great family man, and he was a man of great faith. And so we really appreciate and applaud him, and that's the type of person we aspire to. Okay, so don't be afraid. You know I give you the guarantee, no graphs, no charts, no tables, big pictures. I like to keep it simple. If this is an economic workout this morning, I'm the economic stretching portion of our workout, okay? We're gonna go slow. But I did want to point out two dashboards. The first dashboard is the Florida Scorecard dashboard, and it's a good repeatable source of economic information and business information. The Florida Chamber of Commerce puts it out every year. I should mention Charlie Calkins, one of our members, and one of the best labor lawyers in the country is the outgoing chamber president for the state of Florida. Charlie, thank you for your service. I should also point out that our very own Wayne Izenga funded this initially with $1 million grant, so his gifts just keep giving. Another dashboard I want to point out, CareerSourceBroward.com. CareerSource, excellent, repeatable source of economic and demographic and statistical information. Heiko Dogapau is here, and he serves on that board, and we're going to talk a little bit about why CareerSource is important and talk about our labor crisis here in Broward County. So today I'm going to cover 5 basic metrics about the economy, consumer spending, business confidence, employment, population, those kind of things. I'm going to touch on our 3 legacy industries, the marine industry, real estate and construction. And by the way, we have 7.5 tables from the Construction Executives Association. Give yourselves a round of applause. 7.5 tables these guys come out. We appreciate you. You guys are the tip of the spear here in Broward County, and you guys build the buildings and make things happen, and we appreciate you. So we're going to touch on real estate and tourism, and the marine industry as 3 of our legacy industries. And then we're going to close up by peeking in the door and seeing how our economic engines are doing, our fantastic airport and our seaport. Before I get started, let me just sort of set the groundwork for Broward County. If you do business here in Broward County, if you're based here in Broward County, pat yourself on the back, because you are competing in a very deep economic environment. Look, our GDP of $127 billion, which by the way is up 12% this year versus the national GDP, which is maybe 1 or 2% tops, depending on what figures you look at. So we are part of the South Florida MSA with Miami and Palm Beach, and collectively our GDP is $417 billion a year. I mean, that is tremendous. If we were a state, Broward County alone would be the 35th largest state in the country by GDP. So we're a very deep economy, and you should be proud of that you're able to compete here. Our county is one of only 2 AAA rated, bond rated counties in the state. So we're just an absolute economic animal here, and I will tell you, and you'll sort of see the theme throughout the presentation today, that we, South Florida particularly, in Florida, we're an economic outlier compared to the rest of the country, and I think when David comes up and sort of lays some of the global and international news on you, you'll see how lucky we are here in South Florida. First, we like to sort of set the mood. You know, it's Valentine's Day, we want to set the mood, and we like to take a look at how is small business feeling. They employ 78% of the workforce. You know, you hear about all these big tech layoffs, but small business is really the backbone of our economy, in my opinion, and 70% of our economy is also consumer spending, so this is a big deal. So you look at the numbers, they're 9% and 7%, they're down. They're a little bit down over last year. But keep in mind, these are statewide studies, okay? So I would argue, and I will tell you, and I'll make the case today, that South Florida, particularly Broward and Miami, outpaces all of these surveys. I looked at national surveys for consumer confidence and for small business confidence, and they were double this amount. They were 16, 17, 18%. So when you take in the broader economy, there's a cause for more pessimism out in the broader economy. Consumer spending really drives our local economy. It really does. And you can see if you look down some of these benchmarks, I know it's hard to read in the back of the room, but there's some pretty negative benchmarks out there. You know, folks were flush during the pandemic. Savings rates are at an all-time high at 17%, which are down now to 3.1%. You can see the bottom icon, auto delinquencies are as high as they've been since the Great Recession. You know, there's just some negative benchmarks out there in the broader economy. And so maybe folks like Lori Jones from Boston Klein Debt Collectors, you might have a slightly better year this year. You don't know. But by and large, consumer spending is off. You see 9%, and that's a little bit of a headwind that we're going to have to deal with, but not as much, I think, as the broader economy. Now, some people did do good with the inflation. The chickens are killing it right now. Eggs are 700% greater than they were a year ago. Year over year, 700%. I talked to a local restaurant operator. He said eggs used to be 6%. Now they're almost 50 cents, or 6 cents, and now they're almost 50 cents. I mean, that's a tremendous jump. And I don't know, when we go out to eat, our omelets are still the same price. So I think an overriding theme here in the local economy is top line revenues are very good. Sales are very good. They were good last year, but the cost, the inflation, the labor cost, all of those things are weighing down margins, and margins have been very thin last year. And I think you're going to see a lot of one-offs say, listen, it's not worth it to stay in business to break even. So I think that the prevailing sort of headwind is the inflationary piece. You know, usually, I was telling somebody earlier, usually in an economic forecast, the most boring piece of the whole deck is the population slide. I mean, nothing really ever goes on in population. Well, it's the opposite this year. A tremendous amount of news in population. And last year, we had 400,000 people move to Florida. We were the #1 growing state in the nation for the first time since 1957. So there is truly a transformation occurring in Florida. I mean, that's over 1,000 people a day moving to Florida. That is unbelievable. The next biggest state in terms of growth, we were 1.9%, was Utah at 1%. And you look at our 1.9% against 22 million population, I mean, that's a lot of people moving. And they're not just moving here, they're bringing their wealth. In 2020, we had an in-migration of wealth of $24 billion. The next biggest state was Texas with only $6 billion. So there's been a tremendous amount of wealth that has moved to Florida. Of these 400,000 people that have moved here last year, they have an average household income of $123,000. That's double our area median income here in Broward County. So there's wealth moving here. Over half are college educated. So population is really the big story. We have a tremendous amount of people moving here, and we see that trend continuing. And in fact, I will say it seems like the worse it gets in the rest of the country, certainly in high tax states or states that maybe had draconian lockdown measures during the pandemic, the better it looks for us. Let's take a look at labor and employment. You know, when you look at this screen, it looks good. You know, 48,000 jobs, you know, mostly, you know, leisure industry, services industry, you know, the recovering industries, childcare, healthcare, you know, making up for some tech losses. We had some gains in the construction industry this year. So that looks good, 48,000 jobs. And then the other piece, 2.2%. Wow, that's impressive, right? The state's 2.5%, the nation is 3.4%. So seems like, wow, everything's looking good. And in a lot of these economic forecasts, that's the slide where it stops. But let me just dig a little deeper, because right now in Broward County, you know, I had this slide titled Labor Crisis, but I didn't want to scare anybody, so I changed it to Crunch. But it is a crisis, okay? So let's just run through this quick example. Right now in Broward County, there's 40,000 job openings. There are 23,000 available workers. So if every one of those workers took a job, we'd have 17,000 open jobs. Now, if you look at just the hotel industry, the tourism industry, which is one of our key industries we'll talk about later, they have 6,700 rooms in the pipeline over the next couple of years. So let's just say we're going to need 6,000 workers. So we're going to need 23,000 workers that we don't have an answer for. So that, folks, is an example of a labor crisis. I think the business community is going to really need to step up here. We're going to need to educate and train and get into our schools. Of the 40,000 folks that of the workers that are unemployed right now, 20% of them are 16 to 24 years old. So some of these kids just didn't go to college, didn't work, they're not working. CareerSource Broward is taking steps to address that. And I think what we need to do, number one, is train and educate. We need to be more adaptable to college degree requirements where they're not needed. I think as an employers, we need to provide more flexible work shifts for single parents. We need to provide opportunities for baby boomers maybe to work part-time shifts. And I think we need to take a hard look at nonviolent offenders when they come back into the workforce, giving them an opportunity to work as well. But the labor crisis is real, and it goes hand in hand with the housing crisis, which I'll discuss next, because let's just say we get those, we have the need for those 23,000 jobs. We get 23,000 workers. Where are they going to live? So housing is a mixed bag. If you live in Broward County, you own your house, particularly if you have a low interest rate mortgage for the last 3 or 4 years, you're sitting pretty. I mean, no doubt about it. You're in a great, situation. Your home is appreciating and life is good. But if you're everybody else out there in this county, the story's not so bright. So what are your options? You're going to go rent a place. Broward County has had the highest rent increases in the nation for the last 3 years. We lead the country. So that's great if you own apartments. But if you're a service industry worker, and I should point out that 50% of the workers in Broward County live at 60% of area median income or less. So these are folks getting by every year on $35,000 to $40,000. Do that math. So the point is that we're going to need a place for them to live, and we do have a housing crisis on our hands. But back to that median price of $540,000, which continues to go up. I've seen it as high as $600,000. Here's a staggering statistic for you. Only 5% of workers in this county can afford a median-priced home. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. And you say, well, why? Okay, that's bad, but why should we care? Because it's a business issue, folks. Our hotel workers, our service workers, our restaurant workers, our roofers, where are they going to live? And we're at a competitive disadvantage with Miami and Palm Beach. They've got land to spread out. Miami, you go south. Palm Beach goes west and north. I mean, we're landlocked. We're a barrier market, and that's one of the challenges that we face and we're addressing. Right now, we have over 153,000 severely cost-burdened households. So these are folks that are strapped to their rental payments, strapped to their mortgage payments, and don't have very much money to spend. That does not make them a very good consumer. So as David mentioned in the introduction, I am involved in the affordable housing space. That's something that we are working on, and there are solutions to that. We need to embrace density. We need to lower the hurdles and lower the cost to deliver units cheaper. We need to get creative with those types of things. Cities and municipalities need to step up. Now, I want to just give a plug to Mayor Fisher, has been an absolute leader in the affordable housing space. We talked about $100 million in funding over the last 3 years. Mayor Fisher was on the front of that. Mayor Fisher, congratulations. Thank you so much for your leadership. Okay, so we've got a mixed bag. Population is excellent. We have a labor issue. We have a housing issue. But let's talk about our key industries, our three key industries, our legacy industries: real estate and, of course, construction, marine industry, the unsung hero, and tourism. Those three really built this economy. And then we'll touch on the two engines. Real estate is a bit of a mixed bag. In the fourth quarter of 2022, the transactions dropped 55%. So that's largely due to interest rates, rising costs, property taxes, property insurance. There's a disconnect between buyers and sellers out there. The sellers want early 22 pricing. The buyers want to bake in all these additional costs, construction costs and whatnot. The other reason, too, is that banks have largely been on the sidelines since the third quarter of 2022. They're not lending right now. There's very little money flowing out there from banks. So I will say American National Bank, Ginger Martin, Pam Dalton and her team, yes, thank you. They and other community banks, I see some other community bankers here. The community bankers are putting money back out in the community. And I think that's fantastic at a time when everybody else is pretty much on the sidelines. Now, I largely believe that the banks will come back into the market first or second quarter this year, probably close to the second quarter, as all these loans become due that were written 3 to 5 years ago, and so they're going to have to come back to the table. Hopefully the interest rate environment will be a little more settled then, and we'll kind of know where this is going to end. But for right now, real estate is a mixed bag. Now, having said that, we delivered almost 2 million square feet of industrial warehouse last year. We have 1 million in the pipeline that should get done this year. We delivered 3,000 apartment units last year. We're on schedule to deliver 6,000 apartment units this year. The hotel market, we are still a go-to desired investment target market for the hospitality industry. The Diplomat Hotel just sold for $900,000 a room. So you just think about that pricing. Retail, Bo Rotella and his team, one of the best retail brokers in the state, if not the nation, is in our organization. Retail's very, very busy as well. There's more negotiating that's going on now. There's some interest rate sensitivity, but there is extreme demand for high-quality retail real estate in Broward County, and indeed in South Florida. And office is really in a big reset right now. It's the work from home situation. Our physical occupancy in downtown Fort Lauderdale is about 60%, as opposed to maybe 85 or 90 prior to the pandemic. That does sound bad, but when you measure that against the broader average nationally at about 40%, Fort Lauderdale and Broward County is looking pretty good. And the Main, which Stiles built, Stiles is a member of ours. In fact, the glass building, not the reflection, the glass building is the Main in downtown. If you haven't seen it, it's unbelievable. That building is full with very high rents, and that parking garage is full every day. So it's a mixed bag, but overall, South Florida, Broward County is very good for office. I understand there's 2 million, there's a need for 2 million square feet of office space in South Florida right now, currently. Tourism, we expect to continue to be very good. We recovered quick out of the pandemic. We were open early. We were a drive-to location. 2020, the end of it, and 2021 were fantastic years. Our rents ramped up, our room rates, our RevPAR. This past year, as folks had other options out there in the country, Fort Lauderdale and Broward County, was a second alternative. And so even though our room rates are still up, our RevPAR is down a bit. Our pipeline was down last year. We had about 600 new rooms delivered, but on the upside, we have 6,700 in the pipeline, as you can see. Our tourist tax development is off the hook. And the Broward County Convention Center is under construction and should be done in 2025. That has an 800-room hotel as well. I love the marine industry. It's an unsung hero in our economy. I mean, you look at those numbers. The marine industry in this county employs approximately 10% of our workforce at wages 25% greater than the state average. I think that's fantastic. We just had the Super Bowl this Sunday, and it was a big deal. It was a great game. But it's funny to watch cities and areas fall all over themselves to incentivize the Super Bowl to come to their town. The boat show every year is the equivalent of 4 Super Bowls every year in terms of economic output. You think about that, yeah. So this year's boat show, according to Phil Purcell, the CEO of the Marine Industries Association, was very good. We had 115,000 attendees. We had almost $900 billion in direct sales. He just said there was a little more negotiating on the lower end boats. By lower end boats, 100 meters and less. So you just put that in perspective. But everything else was very good. And you talk about the impacts of the marine industry on the economics. During the boat show week, which is roughly 4 days, Tavistock Development is building 2 luxury condo towers on Pier 66. One's 12 stories and one's 11 stories. They're selling for about $1,825 a square foot. So you think about that. During the boat show, they took 25 reservations for units from people that attended the boat show. So that's about $120 million of direct economic impact just from the boat show on our local real estate economy. So not only does it put heads in beds and fill retail shops like Press and Grind on 17th Street, it creates a lot of economic activity. So the marine industry is fantastic, and it's going to continue to do well. It does have headwinds. We need to get a tunnel or a new river crossing figured out. I know Lamar Fisher and other stakeholders in the room, Greg Chiavera, the city manager for Fort Lauderdale, is here. We're working on it, but that's a big deal. They also need to make sure they continue to upgrade their boat yards. We are the yachting capital of the world, but we need to continue to do that, because when you don't upgrade your boat yards, you don't upgrade the improvements, those underlying sites become susceptible to high-rise development. So that's going on right now, and I think we're in good shape as far as the marine industry goes. Okay, let's finish with our 2 economic engines. I love our economic engines. They are fantastic. Collectively, they produce about $500 million of revenue every year, very quietly. They don't take up our parks. They don't take up our schools. They don't take up anything. They just crank out money, and our port is very well run. 9th largest port in the country. In terms of passenger travel, we are back. The 4th quarter of 2022, we had 950,000 passengers. Our recent high before the pandemic was 2019. We had about 1.3 million in the 4th quarter, so we are making our way back. There was 1.1 million in 2018, so 1.1 million, 1.3 million. Off the chain, 117,000 in 2021, back up, to 1.1 million in the 4th quarter. The port is looking very, very good. We also just almost set an all-time container record in 2022. In fact, we missed the record by 700 containers, 700 TEUs. And at the end of the fiscal year, right before midnight, we had a ship full of 2,000 containers ready to go out of the port, and we would have broke the record. But Hurricane Ian shut the port, and the boat had to stay in. And I asked Glenn Wiltshire, the deputy port director, didn't you want to kind of sneak that boat out right before midnight and break that record? And he said, oh, Miami tried to do that once, and they really got their hands slapped. So we've got some honest operators at the port, but it's doing very well. And what I also love about port is that they invest. They just finished a $471 million turning notch project, which is going to create 5 new berths, a container yard, and all the other supporting facilities to really keep us on the leading edge. And we were so lucky during the pandemic that our port had a balanced source of business. It wasn't just cruise passenger. Port Canaveral, which is almost all cruise, was shut down. So while our cruise passenger was shut down, we continued to do well in container business. And then lastly, the port is currently sprinkling $36 million of pixie dust on the new Disney terminal in Port Everglades. The Disney cruise ships will be here in November 2022, and they'll add a second ship in 2025, so that's exciting. Our airport, I love our airport. We generate $332 million in revenue last year on a postage stamp, really. Our airport is only 1,400 acres. And just to put that in perspective, Orlando is 13,000 acres. Denver is 30,000 acres, and we're on 14,000 acres, and look what we're doing. We were the 4th fastest in the country in terms of international flight recovery. We were the 6th fastest in terms of domestic recovery. Our passenger travel is coming back. You see 28 million last year. The highest we had was 2019, I think, almost 37 million. So Mark Gale and his team are doing a fantastic job at the airport. He tells me that JetBlue and Southwest are lagging behind, but other than that, things are going well. We have nonstop flights now to Paris, nonstop flights to Germany. I just want to say I'm so happy we have that south runway. Does anybody ever know what happened to that mayor that made that deciding vote on that runway down in Dania? I don't know, whatever. If you see him, pat him on the back and say thanks as you're on your way to Paris on a nonstop. I didn't expect shameless applause, but thank you. Like I said, I'm a recovering politician, so I still have a little bit of that in me. But the airport's doing fantastic. You know, they spent almost $3 billion in the last several years building a new terminal, upgrading those 2 runways. And so I see great things for the airport. It's just really well run. And it's one of the only places in the country where a top 15 seaport and a top 15 airport are right next to each other. That picture you see right there is a rendering of the People Mover. Now, we're working on making that happen. So we'll be moving people from the airport over to the seaport and back. And you know, you think, okay, great, that's a great idea, get traffic on the road. But I learned in politics, there's always a different perspective. So think about all the shops on 17th Street that want that traffic on that road every day. So that's gonna play out, but that's the plan. Let me give you the forecast. And it's really no surprise because I've laid out all the answers during this presentation. But my contention is that while there is cause for concern out in the national economy and indeed the global economy, I believe there's a cause for optimism right here in Broward County and certainly in South Florida. We are an outlier. People are moving here. Our businesses are growing. Our top line revenues are fantastic. So I think that even with some of those headwinds like a labor crisis and a housing crisis, which we're going to need to solve, we're going to have a good year economically here. The housing market is going to continue to increase in terms of prices. The supply is static. We just don't have enough supply. So the prices are going to go up, but the transactions are going to be less, but the market's still going to be largely very good. Tourism is going to continue to do well. You see the airline travel and the passenger travel and the cruise travel all, you know, increasing and growing, and we are a good go-to location. And so I think overall, like I mentioned, it's great to be here in Broward County. I think, again, the worse things get out in the rest of the world, the worse things get out in the rest of the economy, the better South Florida looks. And I think Broward County is going to do well this year. Thank you for your time and attention.